Welcome to the Alan and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. Hey, how you doing? Great. How you doing so far today?
Is that you, Al?
Yes, I am. That's me. Yep, I'm glad that you're here.
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear what you said before, mate. I just got you.
Oh, that's all right. I'll just introducing everybody. This is Barry Michael, the former IBF Super Featherweight Champion, commentator, promoter, and boxing icon. How you been?
Yeah, not bad, Al. I don't know if you know, but what was it? November 30th, I had a triple bypass.
Oh wow! So
yeah,
how did that process go?
Well, I'm recovering pretty well, but it was a bit of a terrible shock because a couple of months before I was still training, still sparring, walking 10Ks 3 times a week. But look, I'm not saying it actually caused it, but I had my first COVID shot, and about 3 weeks later, I was playing pool with a mate of mine, and I started getting chest pain and shortness of breath, and went to the doctor, and it was sort of panic stations from then on, and they took me into the operating theatre to put stents in, and next thing I know, I'm being wheeled out, and they said, no, well, you need a bypass. So I got sent to Cabrini Hospital and had it done on November 30th. And I was out of hospital on December the 6th, and just sort of been recovering ever since, Al. But it's terrible shock, to be honest. But look, I think I'm going to be another few months. I think I'm going to be, brand new. I'm feeling pretty good now, considering. No, pretty major operation. They take the main artery out of your left arm and the veins out of your right calf, and the massive, open your chest up. It's a massive operation. Anyway, terrible shock, but I'm on deck and I'm going okay.
Yeah, that's a real blessing. Definitely we hope that your health continues to improve and get better every single day. You're right, a major surgery. So just take it one day at a time.
Exactly, Al. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was a shock.
Are you taking it easy a little bit now with the working out, with the sparring and things of that nature?
Well, yeah, I haven't done any of that. I've only just been allowed to restart driving the car. I've been walking a fair bit. I've still got a bit of pain, but I'm looking forward to getting back in the gym. But I'm going to start swimming next week. Just a slow process. It's a big operation, and the body takes time to recover. But my blood pressure and pulse and everything is really good. So yeah, I think I'm going to recover 110%, to be honest.
Yeah, we're definitely praying that you recover 110%. 150%. We're hoping you get even better.
Thanks, Al.
Oh, you're welcome. And so just tell us a little bit, how did you get started in boxing? How did it all begin for you?
It began, my parents were immigrants from the United Kingdom. Yeah. We came to Australia in 1957 or 8, probably 1978. I was about 2.5. I was born in 55, and we came out by ship, the Castle Felici. We lived in a place called Hamilton for a little while. We were sponsored by the Apex Club because my dad was a Lancaster bomber, and his skipper was a doctor, Dr. Johnny Reimer, who lived in Hamilton, and he sponsored us down there. We lived there for a couple of years in a girls' college, on the fringe of a girls' college. My dad was a caretaker. And then we moved to Williamstown in Melbourne, which is where we lived in Commission Flats. We lived in Commission Flats in Glenbervie before that, but then moved to Essendon. And then, moved to Williamstown, Glenbervie, then Williamstown, in the Commission Flats in Glenbervie too. But the Commission Flats in Williamstown back then was very rugged, very rough. Williamstown now is a pretty, upmarket suburb. But back then, before the Westgate Bridge, it wasn't, and it was known as Dogtown. And there was at school, there were a lot of fights. And, being an immigrant or a migrant, I got in a lot of punch-ons at school. And my dad had taught me how to hold my hands up because he had about 20 fights. And when I was 13, I actually started going to the gym, and when I was 15, I had my first amateur fight and never looked back.
Wow, that's definitely a great story there, and a lot
Al, just one thing, is that lawnmower in the background? Can you hear that?
I don't hear it.
Good. My neighbour's just decided to mow his lawn, I think.
Wow, yeah, that's one thing that I guess people don't understand. It's 12:30 in the afternoon where you're at.
Exactly. Yeah.
Midday.
Where are you calling me from, Al? The States?
Yeah, from the Tampa, Florida area in
Tampa.
USA.
Yeah.
So it's like almost 8:40 p.m. Wednesday here tonight. So
yeah. Okay. Well, I know Florida fairly well. I've been to Miami quite a few times.
Oh wow, so that's great. Yeah.
I trained there with Angelo Dundee and Chris. I used to stay at Chris Dundee's house when he was alive, and trained there quite a bit.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, now that you're not in the boxing game, but one thing that people do know about you is that you never had a standing 8 count.
Yes, I'm really proud of that. I'm the only Australian former world champion, I believe, that never ever took an 8 count. Sorry, I did take an 8 count in my 10th amateur fight.
Mm-hmm.
I had 17 amateur fight and a fight title, and I was going in the flush with a left hook, and I hit the deck. I bounced up. I was so angry. I wasn't hurt, but that was legitimate 8 count. So as a professional, I had 60 professional fights, and I never took an 8 count as a professional, which is something I'm extremely proud of. I did have the crap beaten out of me a couple of times, but never went down.
Wow. Yeah. And you've done it all. You've been a boxer, commentator, promoter. Which job do you feel that you enjoy the most?
Well, nothing will ever beat the high that you get after you fought a quality bout, whether it be, 10, 12, 15 or whatever, and won a major title. Nothing, even lesser bouts, there's no buzz that you will ever compare. I mean, promoting a big show, and I've promoted everything from, state titles to world titles, promoting a big show and seeing it culminate in a great night of entertainment for everyone and get the right results is a great experience, but nothing compares to actually competing and that buzz that you get with it,
So being in the ring, actually fighting is number one.
Number one. It's number one. Yeah, no, that's why fighters, unfortunately, you see it all the time, fighters that should be retired just won't retire because they're always looking for that buzz. A lot of them are looking for the money as well. But the buzz is such a big part of it. I really believe that. It's like the adrenaline. Nothing else compares to it.
Adrenaline flowing when you're in the ring, the crowd is going crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of boxers have said that, though, that they probably stuck around a little bit too long because of that adrenaline.
I've seen it. You see it with this, names I won't name, but in Australia, there's some fighters that are still fighting late into their 40s, and they're just shells of what they were. Former world champions. There's nothing worse for me than seeing a former world champion beaten by someone that shouldn't have carried his bag, really. And you see it regularly. Yeah, it's pretty sad. That's a sad side of our sport. But again, it comes back to the financial aspect, but looking for that buzz as well. So many fighters just don't believe that they're done when they're done, and they don't want to be told either. It's very hard trying to tell a fighter, mate, it's time to hang them up. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the boxing boards, this is why, and we're always going to have serious injuries in our sport because of the nature of it, but a lot of the boxing boards haven't got the ability or the power to take licenses off people, especially if they pass medicals, and it's a tough one.
No, exactly. And having said that, how did you know, Barry, that was it for you in the ring boxing? How did you know?
Well, Al, probably in America you wouldn't know, but it's a pretty well-known story in Australia that I won the world title of Lester Ellis, who, when I was 22, he was 12, and I sparred him and a lot of other kids, and I got out the ring and I said, "Who's this kid?" And they said, "Lester Ellis." So this kid's going to be a world champion. 8 years later, I take his world title off him. But by then, he'd been taken over by, let's say, some notorious Italian, heavies, and they managed him. And just 3 months before I lost 4 months before I lost the title to Rocky Lockridge, I was set up in a nightclub by Lester's former management, because by then, well, actually might have still been with him, I can't recall, but they set me up and beat the crap out of me, jumped me and knocked my young mate out who was coming off the dance floor, jumped me and smashed my nose right across my face with a glass ashtray. One of them tried to bite my cheek off, and I got seriously hammered. And I was never concussed in a boxing fight, and I remember the whole thing. I was pinned on a couch, and I never got off it. I was bitten, I was smashed, and next thing I know, I was being dragged through the crowd by the security and blood spraying everywhere and thrown out the front. It made the papers. It was front page of the papers. I remember exactly what I said when I got out the front. I just said, "Take me to hospital. I've got to go to hospital." I said, "But I've still got the world title." But unfortunately, Al, my nose was so badly smashed that I had to re-broke and reconstructed, and it broke in the first minute with Lockridge. I'll be honest with you, after that beating, I just knew I wasn't the same. In the gym, I was just a fraction behind things where I would have been previously, I think. And I wasn't really conscious of it until, a few of my sparring sessions before I lost the title. And look, I lost the desire, I think, and after the loss to Lockridge, I just, I announced my retirement in the ring, and I regretted it. I did regret it. And I probably would have fought again if I was ever made a legitimate offer that was substantial. I'll be honest with you, Al, after I retired, because I had a reputation of, if you fought me, you knew I'd be there for 10, 12 or 15, and you'd most likely be passing blood after the fight. So the only offers I had, and I had a few of these during my career, were not legitimate offers. And I was never going to take a dive to anyone. So, I never fought again. And it's something I'm proud of now. I look back and I see so many fighters that continue too long. And that's one of the worst parts of our sport. But, fortunately, well, not the beating in Lazars sort of made me decide that I wasn't, I just wasn't the same in the gym, and mentally I wasn't the same. Mental was so much of it too, but I knew it was time.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a horrific event, a real tough time for you to go through that process. And maybe it was the right decision, because if your heart's not into it, then it's time to pretty much call it a wrap, I think.
For sure, Albert. Up and for many, many years after I retired, I still was sparring at top level, and still could have competed, but just didn't. But again, I was never, ever, ever made a legitimate offer to fight anybody at that stage. Not that I did make noises about fighting Jeff Fennick, and I would have come back for that fight for sure. It wasn't the right time for Jeff, and Jeff and I are good mates now. It would have been a cracker fight, I think. It didn't occur, but I would have come back for that one. I would have come back for a rematch against Lester Ellis too, but and there was a lot of publicity, negative publicity that I received, but I was always up for the fight. But Lester now, after 30 odd years, says he never wanted the rematch, which is, finally came out that he never, I would have done it. That fight, I would have either fought Jeff Fennick or Lester for one more fight, and again, the financial aspect of it would have had a lot to do with it, because they would have been big paydays.
Right. It sounded like they were giving you pretty much lowball offers to fight other people.
Well, I didn't get any. There was no other offers to fight anybody, to be honest, but there was quite a bit of talk publicly and, through the boxing fraternities. There was a lot of talk about fighting Lester again. And to be honest with you, for a couple of years, the Ellis camp, not Lester himself, but his brothers, his mate, his elder brother Keith, who's no longer with us, sort of kept saying, they'd fight, they want a rematch. They never wanted a rematch. Lester now will say at a sportsman's night, he never wanted a rematch, and I always had his number. But a lot of people didn't believe so, and believed that I wouldn't give him a rematch, which was never the case.
Yeah, sound like you were ready to go back in there,
Well, I would have, just to prove a point. But to be honest with you, Lester Ellis is one of the greatest fighters I ever fought, and he hit me in round 3. I tell you what, I was in Disneyland. I didn't know where I was.
He was in my neck of the woods.
He was a great puncher and a great fighter, and very hard to hit cleanly too. as I said, at 12 years old, and I was 22, I picked him as a future world champion. And, it's history now that I had to take his world title off him. But we're great mates now, which is good. And his boys are doing extremely well. We probably know, Al, they're promoting a lot of fights out here, and they're doing extremely well.
Oh, that's great to hear. So good that you and him are friends after all these years. It's always a good thing.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm good mates with, you wouldn't believe it. That's one thing about boxing. The average person doesn't understand the camaraderie in the sport. I mean, I'm in contact and still very good friends with a lot of the guys that I fought around the world, even like Juan Jose Jimenez, who I lost to in Indonesia when I was about 22. And I never forget that, because Juan Jose, I think he had about 33 straight wins when I lost the decision to him in, did we fight in Jakarta? I think we fought in Surabaya, Indonesia. And after the fight, after the end of the bell rang to end the 10th round, and he said to me, I said, "You won." And he said, and he couldn't speak much English. He said, piano, io campion del mundo, you'll be champion of the world. And we became good mates, and I trained with him quite a bit in Indonesia. And then a year or so later, I went to Italy, and he was over there, and I trained with him a lot in Italy. And we're still mates, on Facebook and all that sort of stuff. Not that he speaks much English, but I'm great mates with him. Lennox Blackmore, who stopped me in one of only 2 stoppages in my whole career. I went to Guyana Boxing Day 1978, December 26th, and I fought Lennox Blackmore, who was fought for the light welterweight title, 3 weights heavier than what I won the world title at. And he was just too big. I fought him with one hand, and he didn't knock me down. But at the end of round 7, Eddie Thomas threw the towel in, who was the great Eddie Thomas from Wales. And I abused the shit out of him. And he said to me, "Barry, you're a brave fool. You'll live to fight another day," which, went on to win the world title. And Eddie was a great man. But Lennox Blackmore, I've caught up with Lennox. I caught up with him in New York. He's been to Melbourne. And so, a lot of fighters around the world. A lot of Frank Ropers, who I fought on Ash Wednesday, which is one of my famous fights. We're great mates. Lester and I get on well. Graham Brooks, who I won the Commonwealth title off, and another young superstar from Melbourne. We're great. There's so many of my old opponents that we're very good friends.
Yeah, it's great that you have a great fraternity of people that you could be your friends now after so many years. It's always a great thing, and you share the ring with them. So today's boxer, what do you think is some of the things that today's boxer that they do well and maybe they need some work on?
I think there's a tendency in amateur and professional boxing, in fighting, guys who like to fight up close, which was me. I was basically a body puncher. It's becoming a lost art. There's not a lot of good trainers. I mean, when you see a lot of the good Mexican fighters and a lot of the good Americans and fighters around the world are great body punchers, but I think there's a lack of trainers that teach the old style or the old ways, which, for me is the only way. I just think that these days you see fighters. I mean, I had 56 fights before I got a shot at a world title, a bit like Marvin Hagler, who did it the hard way. These days you see guys that have had 10 fights, they've got 3 championship belts, beautiful championship belts, and they haven't really fought anyone with a pulse. They're just, you know what I mean? These days there's a to get fighters up there quickly and build them up before they two, there's not in Australia in particular, there's not enough fighters, like local fighters, to keep everyone active continually. So fights are harder to get, and they don't have as many fights before they get a shot at a major title. And major titles these days, there's just too many of them.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
Yeah, not enough trainers, and you mentioned not too many fighters there. And tell us a little bit about your gym, your boxing gym.
No, I haven't. I've had a few gyms, but I work with a guy called Steve Stenborg, who's owns North Melbourne Boxing and Fitness, and we're great mates. And I basically have open slather to his gym with anyone, because we work in the corner together. We manage fighters together, and we train fighters together. And look, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to be at 66. I don't want to be in a gym from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. a day, which, Steve does that a lot, which, certainly wouldn't suit me now. But I love being at the gym. I love helping people, but I don't want to be a slave to it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And Steve, it's Steve's life, and he loves it. He loves being there, and he trains a lot of people with personal, and I do a few personals as well. And it's a brilliant gym. We've got 2 rings, we've got weight section, bags, you got everything, rowing area. So North Melbourne Boxing and Fitness in 64 Sutton Street, North Melbourne. Steve Stenborg is the owner and the man. He's been there for 15 years, and it's a brilliant setup.
Yeah, and we had Joel Camilleri on here, and I know that you help him a lot. He's got a boxing match coming up real soon on early February that you're helping him promote some of the boxers there. Tell us a little bit about that event.
Yeah, I spoke to Joel twice today. He's actually coming in on Saturday at midday, actually got to ring Steve and let him know, 12:30, 1 o'clock. He's coming into, and he's a ripper bloke, Joel. He's have gloves, will travel, he'll fight anyone, anywhere, and he helps. He's just a ripper bloke. And I'm helping him. He's put 2 of my fighters on his next show on the 17th of Feb, but he's coming in Saturday at 12:30 to spar the main support guy, Luke Pillarinos. Luke's had 2 professional fights for a win and a draw, about 60 amateur fights, and won over 50% of them by knockout. So he's a good puncher. So Joel is coming in to spar with Luke on Saturday morning, which he's just a ripper bloke, Joel Camilleri.
Yeah, he's great guy, and his mother does great work too with her photography.
Yes,
yeah,
Marty's a ripper.
Yeah.
He's great.
That's awesome. And one thing I did want to mention that the person who was able to set up this interview, Glenn Earnshaw, he wanted to have 2 signed autographs for you from photos.
Yeah, well, did you? Okay, I've got his number. I'll ring him. I'll send him one.
Yeah, he's a big fan of your work, and he definitely admires everything you've done in the boxing game. And that's what I've found, is that you're a legend in this sport of boxing.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, well, it's been my life's love, and to be honest with you, coming out of the commission flats, and look, it wasn't as though I was uneducated. I actually got university entrance, and passed my VCE, which is year 12 here, which if you pass that and you get high enough marks, you go to university or whatever. And I actually wanted to do economics, would you believe, or physical education. They were my first 2 choices. But believe it or not, I didn't even put it down. They offered me psychology.
Oh, wow.
So I deferred it for a year. I turned professional, and I had 7 professional fights in my first year and won them all, and won the best first-year boxer on TV ringside, which was an iconic night of boxing every Monday in Melbourne. So I won my first 7 fights, and I deferred the degree, the psychology degree, for a year, and never looked back. And I think, to be honest with you, I've done a degree in psychology anyway.
Yeah, so it worked itself out. But one thing I did want to probably do maybe in the future is maybe commentate a fight. How is it being a commentator? How do you enjoy doing that?
Yeah, that's one of the things I love. I really do love it. Fortunately, I get to work with Main Event and Foxtel on most of the big shows in Melbourne. I've missed a couple recently because of my heart issue, my bypass issue, but I'll be ready to go in the next. Well, I'm ready to go now. But I love doing the commentary, and I've had the pleasure of commentating in the UK and also the US. I worked over there with Jerry Cooney, and oh God, I've got a mental block for a second. It'll come to me in a minute. He's got his own radio, his own show. Anyway, I commentated in New York with Jerry Cooney and sugar. Sorry, I can't remember his name. He'll be filthy on me. So I've travelled the world, commentated in the UK, in Vegas. I worked with Colonel Bob Sheridan a couple of times. Great man, great commentator, one of the best. I've worked with some ripper guys around the world.
Yes.
I mean, Colonel Bob Sheridan, what about the commentaries he's done? Going way back to the start of the Ali, or the Ali era, not the start of the Ali era, but his big fights in Zaire and Manila and all those, massive fights. And I got to work with him. I think I got to work with Colonel Bob first on a world title fight in Australia, and then I worked with him in Vegas on Terence Crawford versus Jeff Horn. Worked with him on that one.
Wow. So yes, you worked a
Mm.
big fight there, and
Yeah.
with Commentator, did a lot of my guests who are boxers, they did mention that maybe when their career is over to be a commentator. Did someone approach you after your boxing career and said, "Hey, would you want to do this," or something you kind of went and checked into doing?
Well, to be honest with you, Al, through my career, I got to the stage where I was ripped off a few times by promoters. So I started promoting my own fights. And I started doing that in my probably mid-20s, maybe even younger. And I'd just jump on the commentary, my promotion, I can do what I want, basically. So I'd jump on as a commentator, but I'd have another anchor commentator. But I started doing that as well. And then I started getting job offers to do commentary. And now I work with, Foxtel Main Event, all the big fights. I get to do most of the big fights in Australia, which is great. At the moment, I'm really enjoying watching Tim Tszju's career unfold, and he's now the number one in the world, and he'll get his opportunity hopefully this year. Charlo's going to fight Castano in a rematch, and the winner has to fight Timmy Tszyu, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It's gonna be a great fight too, and with the people who are striving to be promoters, you mentioned that you got ripped off, unfortunately, by promoters. What advice can you give to people who are striving to be a promoter? What's the best advice you can give them to do things the right way?
Well, you've got to be, when you do a promotion, you need to have the financial backing behind you. It doesn't happen as much now, because back then when I was started as a professional, our boxing boards were relatively weak. But now to become a promoter, you've got to pass certain tests, and it's not so easy. And you need to have they more or less check out that you have the financial backing. But that's in Victoria and New South Wales. There are parts of Australia you could still go, and someone could promote fights, and you could be ripped off. And I won't go into great detail, but I was ripped off. My first world title fight, I signed a fight in Darwin for 140 grand, and I fought the number one in the world, Jin Sik Choi, who'd had about 19 fights, 17 wins, and about 16 knockouts. And he hit me some bombs, but I stopped him in round 4. I dropped him in round 4, and the referee stopped it. But the promoter, I never ever saw him again. He ended up bankrupting himself and sent me a check for 5 grand out of 140. So that was a pretty painful one. Yeah,
that hurts about as bad as those shots that he gave you. Sorry to hear that. Man.
Bloody oath. I wish I had it now. Especially that was 1980. That was 1985. So imagine what it'd be worth now.
Yeah, that's right. It sounded like a lot. Like even today, you're right. If it was back then, it would be about 10 times that. Yeah.
Yes, it'd be in the millions. Yeah, for sure. And when the offer was made to me, and I won't go into great detail, but obviously the background checks on him weren't strong enough, and he it's a long story, but yeah. So look, I've got to write a book. I really have to write a book. I've started a few times and it's sort of stopped and started, but it's something that I do want to do, while I'm still on this earth, is write a book about the things I've seen and the pitfalls that fighters can fall into. I've seen fighters used. I've seen fighters die. I've seen 3 boxers die in the ring. I've seen it all, and I've seen boxers damaged. And our sport gets a lot of good publicity and a lot of bad publicity. And unfortunately, there's always going to be major accidents. Things that no matter how careful you are. But fortunately, our medical requirements and boxing boards are a lot better than they used to be. But you're still always going to see those injuries, and it's just one of the aspects of our sport. It is a dangerous sport. Yeah, but you look at now with what's happening with Aussie rules footballers in particular and rugby players. They're showing a lot of damage, later in their lives from all the knocks to the head they get playing, and a lot of footballers, Aussie rules footballers, are showing signs of head trauma and brain damage. And the reason I believe it is they get hit behind the play. They don't know they're going to be hit. They get knocked out as I said, I mean, I had 60 professional fights. I was never concussed or never knocked down, whereas I've read of footballers that have been knocked out 50, 60 times. You know, it's concussion. Can't do you a lot of good. So, you know, boxing is a dangerous sport, but I don't believe it's anywhere near as dangerous as a lot of other sports.
No, you're right. I mean, it's dangerous, but you're right. There's football, NFL, and
Yes.
yeah, so it can be dangerous. People running around as fast as they can, collisions.
Yeah. You know,
Yes.
head collisions, hitting and behind the play. You see a lot of Aussie rules footballers get knocked out and they don't even know it's coming, you know, and knocked out severely, you know.
Yeah, you're right about that. That's the worst when you don't see it coming. But
undoubtedly.
yeah. But that's your goal for 2022 is to stay healthy and write that book because
yeah,
you got world of knowledge.
Al, there is a guy too. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but there's a documentary you can Google. It's called A Melbourne Story, and it's about Lester Ellis and I. Right from the start, it's got the gangster side of it and what they did to me in the nightclub and all that side of it. It's a great documentary, and the guy who actually did that documentary, which was 15 years ago now, is adamant that he's still going to do a movie about Lester and I. He reckons it's worth a movie. So let's hope that happens as well. Guy called Nick Butler from Bright Star Media. But A Melbourne Story, if you're a boxing fan, and any of the fans out there that want to have a look at a couple of my fights, one of my greatest fights was against a black American called Al Earthquake Carter, and no one ever hit me as hard as this bloke. When I fought him, he had 23 knockouts in 24 fights. He was from Alliance, Ohio. Al Carter versus Barry Michael, that's a great one. And the winner was supposed to get a shot at Boom Boom Mancini. That was 81, 87. I met David Wolf at the convention, the boxing convention. He came up and approached me and he said, Barry, you're on the short list of contenders to fight Boom Boom for the title because you were marketable. He said, but when you beat Al Carter, because he was from Alliance, Ohio, the same as Boom Boom, he said, we didn't fancy Boom Boom with Al. He said, we weren't going to fight you and neither was anyone else. So I'm indebted to Lester Ellis for the rest of my life because, you know, I wasn't going to get a shot. That's for sure.
Yeah. So definitely I'll watch that documentary. I'm hoping now that you get that movie done too. Yeah.
Yep. A Melbourne Story, Al Carter, Barry Michael, and also Frank Roper's Barry Michael, we fought. Frank was the welterweight champion of Australia. I was the lightweight champion. And we fought and Frank hadn't been beaten for about 7 or 8 years. He just stopped Hector Thompson and beaten Baby Cassius for the Commonwealth welterweight title. We both fought at light welterweight at 63.5. And unfortunately, the whole of Victoria was basically on fire. It was called Ash Wednesday, February the 16th, 1983. And the whole hall was full of smoke. It was the Melbourne Town Hall. And they reckon it was 55 degrees under the ring lights. And I stopped him at the start of the 11th round. And I tell you, that was the physically hardest fight of my life. And that's another one that's on YouTube. Barry Michael versus Frank Ropers. And the whole Lester Ellis fight, 15 rounds is on there as well for any fan that wants to have a look at them. But the Al Carter fight, when you see the shots that Al Carter hit me with, no one ever hit me as hard as he did. Round 8, the commentator, he hit me with a left hook. He's saying Barry Michael's been hit with a dozen knockout punches tonight, doesn't look like being hurt, but now he's hurt. And then he goes, he's gone. He gave me up as gone, and I was rocking and rolling, and Al hit me with everything but the corner stool, and I got through the 8th round, and he walked back to his corner, and I came out in the 9th, and I was fine, and I finished the 9th and 10th well on top and got the decision. But Al Carter was the hardest puncher I ever fought, no doubt.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of great memories, and I'm going to make sure I keep up with you. Tell the fans how they can follow you that are listening here that are very, very big into Barry Michael. How do they follow you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. Unfortunately, I'm not that good with all the technological stuff. You know, I know a lot of these big identities have followers, and you know, I've always had 5,000 friends on Facebook, and that's the maximum you can have as a friend. You know, there's thousands and thousands of requests that I haven't been able to accept. But I've got to change that at some stage. But you can get me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well. But, you know, if you try to get me on Facebook, doesn't mean I'll accept you as a friend request, because I can only have 5,000 rather than followers, which I've got to change it at some stage and get someone that's very good with social media able to set it up differently for me, because I'm not that tech savvy when it comes to all that stuff. I'm a bit of a dinosaur, you know.
Well, you're on Zoom, so you're already doing something great. That's awesome.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
I can work a computer with most things, but you know, I'm not brilliant with it all. It's just you know. And I tell you what, all these passwords do my head in.
Yeah,
you know?
I feel honored that I'm one of those few 5,000 that are friends with you on Facebook. So I feel honored now after hearing that.
Good stuff, Al.
Yeah.
That's good.
But definitely take good care of your health. We definitely appreciate you being with us here on the Alan and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. And we're going to follow you and definitely keep you up to date on what's going on with your book and possibly the movie. And definitely be safe.
Good. Thank you, Al. And look, mate, a pleasure. Anytime you need me on, just give me a buzz and I'll be there.
I appreciate that. We'll do. And thank you so much for joining us.
And I look forward to meeting you when I come over to Florida next time, which, you know, hopefully won't be too far away. Let's hope COVID disappears from the world and we can all travel the way we used to. Absolutely.
I would look forward to seeing you here in this neck of the woods. And hey, if I go to Australia, I'm going to try to look you up over there too.
And undoubtedly, mate, you're always welcome to come and prop at my joint as well.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that. Mate. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Al.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.
Bye.